Ash falls on the chapel in Reims. Not snow, not rain. Ash. It dances through the sky like little pieces of prayers that never made it to heaven. And I'm here, kneeling where the altar used to be, my right hand pressed over a hole in my left side, and my left gripping her locket. The sound of gunfire has already become part of the scenery. It's strange how war has its own birds, its own trees, its own songs. Outside, the trees have no leaves, only shards of metal caught in their branches, and the birds. The birds are screams, but inside this skeleton of a church, there is silence. A silence stained with blood and memory. She called me Elijah, never Eli, only her, with that rough edge in her accent like she was playing a piano slightly out of tune. And still, it was the most beautiful thing I ever heard. The first time I saw her, I thought she was a vision, like one of those saints people claim to see in the middle of a fever. Her skirt was muddy up to her knees. Her knees were scraped, her hands were covered in dried blood and iodine, but her face was clean, as if she'd chosen to save just that part of herself, just to remember she was still human. She didn't see me then. I was just another body brought in on a stretcher made of canvas and urgency. I lost 3 days in that aid station, in fever, in tremors, but I remember her voice, low, certain. Respirez encore, respirez. Breathe again, breathe, even with the Germans just 2 fields away, even with the walls trembling from shell fire. She spoke like the entire world depended on that soldier's breath. Maybe it did. My name is Elijah Mercer. I'm 19, or I was. I don't know anymore. Time got stuck somewhere in a shell crater between Soissons and Reims. I came from Missouri. I worked with wheat, scraped rust off wagon wheels, and I used to think the world was too big for me. Now I know the world isn't big. It's narrow. It fits between a trench and a letter. It fits between a kiss and a scream, and sometimes it fits inside a silver locket. Hers held a lock of her sister's hair, or it did. Now it holds ours. She cut a piece from the back of my neck when she thought I was sleeping, said it was superstition. Lie, it was love. A sick, reckless, quiet love. The only kind that survives in times like these. I went back to the line after my arm healed, but my heart never left the cellar of that hospital. Every time the sergeant barked an order, run, dig, watch, my mind returned to the smell of old wine, damp cloth, her skin, Colette. I think that's why I'm here now, because even wounded, even bleeding, even with the sky coming down around me, all I wanted was to be near her one more time. And the chapel was our place, the place nobody watched, because everyone figured God had already left. But she came. She always came. Before the last patrol, she left me a note tucked in my sock. Demain, minuit chapelle, nous décidons. Tomorrow, midnight chapel. We decide. She wanted to run. She had it all planned. A dead mailman and his documents. A freight train through Chalons with empty cars. A man at the station with tired eyes and silence for sale. And a place called Mouriez near Marseille, where nobody asks questions, where the ghosts are quieter. I read that note 30 times, folded it, tucked it away, unfolded it again. I was afraid of how badly I wanted to say yes. But then the sergeant came. Red eyes, sweaty hands, words that landed like stones in the throat. Tomorrow we move west flank. Surprise assault. High Command's orders. Ready your soul, Mercer. This ain't a patrol. It's a baptism. I wanted to laugh. Baptism. The only baptism we had out here was mud and blood. But I said yes, like I always did, because saying yes was easier than explaining the no. Colette didn't know yet, not when she wrote the note. Maybe she knew now, maybe she was coming, or maybe not. Maybe she'd gone alone. Maybe this locket in my pocket is a goodbye. The pain comes in waves, hot ones, like my body's still deciding whether to fight or let go. I taste iron in my mouth, and I think of our first kiss. It happened in the most ridiculous moment, behind a barrel of wine, with the smell of death in the air, both of us covered in mud to our necks. She looked at me and said, "Pourquoi tu regardes comme ça?" I didn't understand most of it, just two, but even without knowing the words, I knew what she meant. Why are you looking at me like that, like I'd just seen God? And that's exactly what it was. I kissed her. She let me, then she slapped me, then she kissed me back, then she cried. She said she couldn't love a man with an expiration date, and I told her every man out here had one. Out. Even the ones giving orders. She said that was cowardice. I said, no, it's just the truth. The chapel columns seemed to breathe. They're crooked, cracked, burned, but still standing like us, wounded, but here for now. If she comes, I don't know if I can say no, not with this cold, not with this fear, not with this hollow inside me. I hear footsteps, slow, bare, the kind of footsteps only love knows how to make, the ones that try not to wake fate. My eyes blur. The moonlight pours through like a curtain, like a veil, and there she is, a silhouette against the broken altar, hair tied back, apron stained, holding something, a letter. She doesn't speak. She kneels, looks at me and smiles. With her eyes, Colette, she came. And now I'll have to choose to run with her or die with them. She looked at me like I had already decided, as if she knew that something inside me had already broken, and now it was only a matter of time before I followed what was left. Colette always had that gift. Seeing before reality showed its hand, she used to say eyes could lie, but breath never does. And in that moment my chest was rising like a man standing between two cliffs. She placed the letter on the ground near my mud-soaked boot, and when her fingers touched mine, it wasn't affection. It was a request, a silent plea. Her eyes didn't hold hope anymore, just urgency. Je ne veux pas te perdre, she whispered. I don't want to lose you, I answered softly, my throat dry with dust and fear. I don't want to lose myself either, she understood, because Colette always listened with her soul. She always had. She unfolded the letter and began to speak, not looking at me, but at the cracked altar, where a headless crucifix still clung to the stone. This is the identity of a man named Émile Arnaud. He died in Soissons. Rats ate through his pack in the supply shed. I took his papers when no one was looking. He was a mailman, orphan, no brothers, no one. It's all official, stamped, sealed. She paused, breathed deep. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, trying to stop my hands from shaking. I've got a spot on a freight train leaving Chalons tomorrow night. It passes Tonnerre, then Dijon, then Avignon. And there, a doctor, a friend of my father's. He can hide us in Moriez, near the sea, where no one asks where you came from, where the bodies from this war don't wear names or uniforms, just salt and silence. Then she looked at me, really looked. There was no tenderness left in her eyes, only survival. But I'm not going without you, Elijah. My full name again. It always undid me, not like a boy being called by his mother, but like a man being called to live, not die. I have to go with the men at dawn, I said. Sergeant Thomas. He told us this morning, west flank assault, no British support. Just 2 platoons, he said. Start praying. She went silent for a long moment. Her lips trembled, but her eyes didn't. Then pray here with me one last time, and then come with me. It doesn't have to be forever, just as far as it goes. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small wooden cross. Dark, plain, the kind a child would carry. My brother's Jean, he died in Verdun. My parents never even found out how. They just said, he got lost in the mud. Take it if you die. Die with someone who loved you in your pocket. She pressed the cross into my bloody hand and wrapped both of hers around it. I felt warmth, but not from skin, from faith, her faith, the kind that believed there was still a way out besides killing or being killed. But I was still a soldier. The next morning, before the sun even touched the frost, I was called to the officer's tent. The sky was black, but the ground already reeked of lead. Sergeant Thomas walked with me. He looked older, eyes sunken, jaw locked, like a man who had been swallowing his soul for weeks. Lieutenant Hargrove's hands were trembling. In one, a cigarette. In the other, a map. Here, he said, south flank, near Saint-Thierry. Intel says the Germans are falling back. Looks that way, but it's a screen. They're baiting us. That's why we go around, quiet, quick, 20 men. You two are leading the point. Thomas didn't blink. I forgot how to breathe. The objective is simple, Hargrove went on. Take the line and hold until reinforcements cross the canal. But I'll be blunt. Odds are you don't make it back. The words hit like dry stones. Odds are you don't make it back, it was their elegant way of saying, we're sending you to die, and if by some miracle you live, good. If not, we'll write your name in clean ink. I stared at the map, saw the route, saw the time. We'd move before light, arrive with the cold. If the Germans were there wouldn't be time to ask forgiveness from anyone, not even God. As I stepped out of the tent, Thomas caught my shoulder. If you're scared, sit down, breathe, then get up. Every good man's afraid. Fear saves you, not stupid courage. I nodded, but I didn't know what fear meant anymore. Back at the trench, I pulled out my letter to Ma. It was scratched through a dozen times. I rewrote it again. Ma, if this letter reaches you, it means I didn't come back. But don't cry. I saw the sky before the end, and it had lavender eyes. I didn't sign it. Folded it into an envelope stained with blood. Mine, maybe I didn't know anymore. At dusk, I pulled out Colette's locket, opened the cross she'd given me. Inside, a tiny ribbon with her brother's name, Jean Arnaud, 1896-1916, and one word in French, written in a child's hand, Reste, stay. Had she already known I wouldn't go? The dilemma throbbed like a hammer in raw flesh. Run with her, burn it all down, become no one in a place where the sea sings instead of guns, or stay. But stay for what? For the dark? For the ditch? That night, I returned to the chapel. She didn't come. I waited until the cold made me forget what time meant. Still she didn't come, but there was a handkerchief wrapped around a piece of stale bread. Inside it a single sentence. If you go, come back whole. If you don't, live for both of us. No name. Didn't need one, Colette. Always saying with little what others screamed and never meant. And then, for the first time, I felt fevered, as if my soul was being split by a bayonet. 2 truths, 2 fates, 2 tomorrows, and 1 heart, beating like a drum in the dark. The sound of footsteps in the mud is what haunts me most. Not the explosions, not the gunfire, not the screams of men burning at the edge of artillery fire. It's that sinking sound, schlupf, schlupf, like the earth itself is trying to pull us back into its womb. We march in silence. The sky still sleeps, dark as a mourning shroud. Sergeant Thomas walks ahead with his rifle slung across his back and an unlit cigarette clenched between his lips. He chews the silence. I walk behind him, carrying the weight of the rifle, and something heavier, the weight of what I left behind in the chapel. No one speaks. Speaking is a luxury death doesn't allow. Sometimes a man coughs, another stumbles, another whispers a prayer between clenched teeth. Some hold medals, photos, stained socks from their children, strands of hair from their wives. I carry her handkerchief. It's folded inside my helmet, near my forehead. As if it could filter fear, the biting cold mixes with the scent of oil and wet leather. And even with my body aching, my mind drifts, escapes, returns to the hospital. To the day I truly met her. It was about a week after the wound to my arm. I was sitting propped against a pile of flour sacks that smelled of mold and rust. She appeared with a bowl of soup and a piece of bread that felt like stone. Tu veux manger? I didn't understand. I nodded. She laughed, the kind of laugh that only comes from someone tired of suffering but still willing to mock the world. She sat beside me without ceremony, using the edge of her apron to wipe her forehead. She looked at me like I was just another among many. Tu n'as pas peur? I shook my head. I wanted to say yes, but I didn't have the words. French still felt like an echo. Then she pointed at my chest. Ton cœur. Elle bat trop fort, my heart. It was beating too fast. She didn't need a stethoscope to know. She didn't even need to touch me. She just saw it. It was true. Around her, my body remembered it was alive. Not because of war, but because of her. She taught me the names of small things. Spoon, window, wind, pain. She told me that in French, survivor and ghost sound nearly the same. Sometimes they're the same thing one evening. After night fell quickly, she led me to the back of the hospital where an old wine barrel rested under a thick layer of dust. She opened it and stole 2 glasses, poured in silence. À la vie qui reste, she said, to the life that remains. We drank, she trembled, and then leaned against me, not out of passion, out of necessity. like someone who escaped a fire and found a patch of cool earth. I held her, and she cried. Without sound, the tears slipped down her cheeks like they'd been held for months. And finally, alone, they chose to fall. She told me she'd watched 200 men die, that sometimes she dreamt of their eyes, still open, still asking why, that she buried 3 friends in a single day, and still came back the next morning to stitch strangers back together. And then she kissed me quick. She kissed, precise, almost clinical, but it shattered me. In that moment I knew I would never come back whole. Even if my limbs returned with me, something would remain trapped there. Between that kiss and the dust-covered barrel of wine, a crack of sound yanked me from the memory. Explosion ahead. Thomas raised his fist. We stopped. One of the scouts sprinted back. German lookout, 200 meters, 2 men sleeping, Thomas whispered orders. 2 of ours crept forward. I watched their silhouettes vanish into the twisted trees. Time stood still. Minutes passed. Then the shapes returned. Alone, no gunfire, no glory, no visible blood. The kind of death war prefers, without witnesses, without names. We moved on. The forest of Saint-Thierry rose ahead. Twisted trees, exposed roots, old trenches smothered by leaves and forgotten corpses. The ground sank beneath us at times, as if resenting our steps. Here, every step could be the last. 1 inch off, and you hit a mine, a trap, a buried rib. I started to think, what if I ran now? What if I just drifted from formation? Slipped into the dark, waited until the platoon vanished, and made my way to the station in Chalons. She'd be there, waiting like she promised. But then I looked at Thomas. He was more than a superior. He was the man who held me when I tried to throw myself from the trench my first week, who split his last cigarette with me after I buried Private Parker, who taught me how to laugh, even with rats sleeping on my chest. If I ran, I'd leave him and the others and the last shred of myself. My thoughts spun, doubt pulsed, it clawed and hammered. The wind changed, smelled of metal and fire, smoke, then a sharp, dry sound, gunshots, short, then an explosion, chaos. Thomas shouted, "Down!" But it was too late. Jensen, one of ours, was hit in the throat. He fell without a word, no drama, just collapsed like a torn sack of grain. The German machine guns had spotted us. They were ready. We ran for the trees, threw ourselves into the mud. The earth exploded around us. Dirt, shrapnel, fire. I hit the ground, face first. My ears rang. Thomas was beside me. He fired carefully, but it was like spitting at the sea. "Fall back!" he yelled. "To the rise!" One at a time, we ran. I was the 4th. When I stood, something tore into my leg. Hot, sharp, but I kept moving. Fear pushed harder than pain. The need to see Colette again screamed louder than the wound. We huddled behind an embankment of dirt and rock. 6 of us now. Out of 20, I didn't know how many were alive or whole. Thomas was bleeding from his shoulder, but said he was fine. I knew he wasn't. He leaned his head into the mud and smiled. Yes, smiled. Knew this would go to hell, he said, but we went anyway, because that's what we do. I looked up. The clouds were starting to glow. Morning was coming, and so was death. And everything inside me begged for an answer. Not from the army, not from God, from myself. How many lives is mine worth? How many promises break just to keep a uniform clean? I took a deep breath, reached for her handkerchief, pressed it to my wound, closed my eyes, and asked myself, is there still time? The taste of blood in my mouth won't go away. I don't know if it's mine. Maybe it's Jensen's. He fell less than a meter from me. Face turned to the sky, eyes still trying to understand what had happened. Or maybe it's from the earth itself. Because out here, even the ground bleeds. Every inch of this cursed forest is soaked with men who were once promises, and returned to the soil as mud. Thomas is slumped against me. His head feels like it's made of iron. I had to grab him by the collar when he started to fall sideways. The wound in his shoulder tearing open a little more with every step. "Leave me, kid," he whispered. "Go, just go." But I didn't, not for a second, because you don't leave a man like Thomas behind. He was more than a soldier. He was an anchor, the only thing keeping me from falling completely apart. Now we're crouched behind the ridge, caked in mud down to the bone, waiting for death to lose interest long enough to let us slip away. Silence, not the kind that means peace. Predator silence. I know the Germans are watching. They're not shooting anymore because they think we're already finished. Maybe they're coming down. Maybe they'll finish the job with bayonets. That part always scared me more. Not the bullet, but the blade. The intimacy of death when it looks you in the eye before it cuts. Elijah. Thomas calls my name, his voice thin, drifting. Yeah, I answer, pressing his wound with the last of my torn field cloth. If I go, don't let them lie. Don't tell my wife. Tell her I died clean, that I tried, that I didn't scream. He lets out a laugh, dry, cracked. And tell her I never learned to dance, but with her, I would have danced forever. His hand finds mine. You hear me? Promise me. I promise. He closes his eyes. I don't. I can't. I lay him down slowly, gently, cover his face with my handkerchief. I don't know why. Maybe to give him a little sky, even if it's just a square of cloth. I get up. There's only smoke, silence, and the sound of my own footsteps walking away from him. The forest feels different now, like every tree is watching me, asking what I left undone. I feel the guilt rise into my throat. Thomas was supposed to be one of the ones who made it, one of the ones who comes home and tells the story, not one of the ones who becomes the story. I crawl back, cutting across the slope. The pain in my leg and side throbs with every breath. Every step is a fire. But I keep going, because there's no choice, because if I stop, I'll fall down with him. I reach the rally point, an abandoned barn with half its roof caved in inside. 4 men, just 4. Out of the 20 who left, 3 are crying openly. The other just stares at the floor, his face caked in mud. Expression hollow, as if his soul had been yanked out and left behind in the field. A field medic rushes over, grabs me by the shoulders. I try to stay upright, but my legs give out. They lay me down. I fight the blackness, but it wins. I wake to the sound of rain tapping a metal bucket. I'm lying on damp straw. My chest is bandaged, my legs too. My boots are gone. I'm whole, but I don't know how. The barn door creaks and she walks in. Colette, soaked head to toe, hair clinging to her face, eyes hard. She walks straight to me without a word. Kneels, touches my cheek, and then slaps me. Tu es un imbécile. She says it low, but sharp. Her hands are shaking. Tu devais partir, on avait tout. We had everything, she says. Everything. And I ruined it. I try to speak, but my throat closes. The words die before they can be born, she cries. But it's not grief. It's fury, and it cuts deeper than any wound. She stands, paces the floor, mumbling about the train, about Chalons, about a man who waited for us and is gone now. She throws a bundle at me inside, forged papers with my name, my photo, my new life, now just dead paper. Pourquoi? She asks. Why did you choose death, theirs, not ours? And I have no answer. Because it wasn't a clean choice. It wasn't rational. It was fear disguised as honor, or maybe the other way around. Maybe it was pride or guilt, or just the fear of being happy. When so many were dying, she sinks to the ground, collapses, and I just watch. I love you, I say at last. But she doesn't answer. She just closes her eyes and sleeps right there on the barn floor like a wounded soldier. The next day she helps me up, lets me lean on her shoulder, takes me to an old cellar beneath a ruined vineyard. There we have food, water, medicine, and silence. She cares for me without speaking. Without looking me in the eye, her hands are precise, mechanical, like before. But now there's a wall between us. At night, she covers me with a thick blanket, lays beside me but doesn't touch me. The hours crawl, the rain doesn't stop, and outside, the world still kills. I feel the urge to run, but not from the war, from her eyes, from her absence. Right there in the same room, I close my eyes and see Thomas, Jensen, all the ones who didn't come back, and I ask myself again, was it worth it? My heart feels heavier than my legs. My mind spins like a broken radio. Just static and old voices. Then before dawn I hear her voice, soft like a prayer. Je t'aimais, je t'aime, mais je ne sais pas si je pourrais encore. I loved you, I love you, but I don't know if I still can. And something inside me shatters, like glass beneath fire. The loss wasn't just a friend. It was her too, the future we might have had. There in the dark, I finally understand. The war didn't kill me. It just left me alive, long enough to watch everything I loved slip away, and that is somehow worse. The candle burned low inside the cellar. Its flame wavered each time the wind slipped through the cracks in the stone. The light wasn't enough to warm the air, but it was enough to cast shadows, long ones, and turn our silence into something almost holy. Colette had fallen asleep on the cot beside me, her back turned, her hands curled like she was still tending to someone else's wounds in a dream. I watched her breathe, not out of longing, out of fear. Because I didn't know if she'd still be here when the sun rose, the pain in my side had dulled into a deep, cold throb. I could feel the stitches pulling against my skin every time I shifted. The fever had come and gone twice, but it wasn't the wound in my body that kept me awake. It was the one I carried inside my ribs, the one she gave a name to when she said, "I don't know if I can still love you. I deserve that." I had stood at the edge of the world with freedom in one hand and duty in the other, and I chose the grave. I didn't run when I could, not because I was brave, because I was afraid to let go of what made me a soldier. And now, I wasn't one thing or the other, not a deserter, not a hero, just a man who said no to love when it knocked with trembling hands. There were 2 letters in front of me, unfinished, one for my mother, the other for Colette. I stared at them like confessions, like sins waiting to be carved into the paper. The first one was easy, the one for home. I'd written a dozen versions before. They always started the same, "Dear Ma." But this one had no date, no place. I didn't want her to know where I was, only that I was still breathing, still trying, still ashamed. "Ma, I don't know if this letter will find you, but I hope it does. And I hope more than anything that you never stop singing in the kitchen like you used to, even when no one listens. Especially then. I want you to know that I saw something here, something that made this whole damn thing worth it. Not honor, not the flag, something smaller, softer, a woman. She saved me, not just from bullets, from the part of me that didn't believe in anything anymore. If I don't make it back, please know this. I loved once, truly, and I was loved back. And maybe that's enough. I folded it carefully, no envelope, just tied it with a piece of string. Then I turned to the second letter, this one. My hands shook. What could I possibly say that hadn't already been swallowed by the silence between us? What words could mend the fracture I'd carved into her heart? Still I wrote, "Colette, I wish I had been brave in the way you needed, the kind of brave that turns away from orders and runs toward something real. I wanted to, God, I wanted to. But when the time came, I was still a soldier, a boy in a man's boots, clinging to a lie I'd been fed since the day I signed my name. And now I'm not sure what I am, but I know this. I would set the whole war on fire if it meant hearing you laugh once more. I still carry the cross, still wear your breath on my skin, still taste your name in every silence. If you still believe in anything, let it be this. I will never stop choosing you, even when I chose wrong. I didn't sign it, just folded it and slid it under the cot where she slept. Maybe she'd find it in the morning, maybe not. But at least the words would live somewhere other than inside my ribcage. I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the cellar breathe, to the wind dragging whispers through the stone, to the echoes of Thomas's voice replaying like a phonograph needle stuck on a scratch. Don't let them write the ending for you. And I thought, maybe there's still a way to rewrite it myself. I reached for my coat in the inside pocket. The orders, crumpled, blood-speckled, still intact. I pulled them out, unfolded them with shaking fingers. The ink was smeared in places from sweat or rain or regret, but the words were clear enough. Coordinates, timing, names. The next suicide push, the one that would go forward without Thomas. Without anyone ready for it, I lit the match, held it just above the corner of the page, felt the heat kiss my thumb, and then I stopped, because burning them wouldn't change the war, wouldn't stop the push, wouldn't resurrect the dead. But maybe there was something else I could burn. I got up, limped to the storage box where Colette kept her lantern oil and matches, pried it open, took 3 bottles, enough for a decent blaze, enough to make someone listen. I was going to give them a choice they didn't know they had. If I couldn't run, I'd make sure the rest had a chance to. I wrote one last note. Short, no poetry, just truth. No more boys in trenches, no more orders from ghosts. We choose life now. I pinned it to the barn door. When I stepped outside, the sky had turned to ash. Dawn was near, the kind of dawn that doesn't bring warmth, only visibility, enough to be shot in, enough to be seen. I limped toward the field command post, the one with the orders, the one where the new lieutenant kept his maps and pride and whiskey. No one was there yet, just a sentry, half asleep. I nodded to him. He didn't question me. I slipped inside. The papers were stacked on the desk. Maps, orders, coordinates, names. I poured the oil, struck the match, and watched the war curl into smoke. It was quiet at first, a soft whoosh, then louder, crackling, angry, like it had been waiting all this time for permission to collapse. By the time they saw the fire, it was too late. The orders were gone. And me? I was no longer a soldier, not by their standards, maybe not even a man, but something new, something unnamed. When I turned back, she was there, standing in the doorway of the cellar, barefoot, hair loose, eyes swollen with sleep and something else. She didn't ask what I had done. She already knew. I fell to my knees, not from pain, from everything else, from all the weight I'd been carrying since the trenches, since Missouri, since my first breath. She came to me, slowly, silently, knelt and placed her forehead against mine. "Tu as choisi," she whispered. "You chose." And I nodded, not because it felt right. Not because it felt good, but because, for the first time since the war began, it felt mine. They came for me just after sunrise. No bugle, no formality, just two soldiers with rifles slung across their backs, and an officer with his coat still half-buttoned and his voice sharp from too little sleep. "You Mercer?" I didn't answer. I just stood still, facing the scorched skeleton of what had been the field command post. The smoke still hung low over the valley. The wind hadn't taken it yet. Maybe it never would. Maybe some flames leave their scent in the soil forever. The officer stepped forward. A lieutenant, fresh, barely older than me, probably from Pennsylvania or Connecticut. The kind of man who still called it the Great War, like it was a noble contest instead of a graveyard without end. "I'm going to ask once," he said. "Did you destroy the orders?" The two soldiers flanked him. One looked uncertain. The other stared straight ahead, jaw locked, hands twitching against the stock of his rifle. I didn't speak. He stepped closer. "Do you understand what you've done?" I looked past him, toward the horizon, toward the trees where Thomas had died, toward the dirt that still held pieces of Jensen and Martin and Kessler, toward the road that led nowhere but back into the same hell. "Yes," I said quietly. "I understand better than you." He didn't hesitate. That was the thing with men like him. They couldn't afford hesitation. He nodded. The rifle butt slammed into my gut. I hit the ground hard. The breath knocked from my lungs. Gravel cut into my cheek. The world blurred, my vision filled with boots. "You are under arrest for treason, Private Elijah Mercer," the officer said coldly. "You'll be detained until we return to command. Then we'll let the generals decide what's left of you." They bound my hands behind my back. Not tight, but not gently either. The rope scraped raw against my wrists. The metal of their rifles clinked against my knees as they marched me past the remains of the fire. One of the men whispered, "You're lucky they didn't just shoot you." I didn't answer, because luck had nothing to do with this. This wasn't mercy. This was delay, punishment dressed in protocol. They locked me in a supply cart, the kind used to carry rations or ammunition, now emptied, just floorboards, shadows, and a broken window covered in soot. Hours passed. I counted them by the movement of light through the cracks. Outside, the battalion was preparing to move again. Without the orders I'd burned, everything had shifted. No assault today, no rush into Saint-Thierry. The command would need time to reissue direction, regroup, rewrite the chaos. Days, maybe. I had bought them that. A pause, a breath, but not for free. The guard posted outside didn't speak, just paced. The sound of his boots crunching in the frost came in steady rhythms, every step a second ticking closer to a sentence no one had spoken yet. But I could already hear execution by firing squad for burning what they called victory that night. The guard was changed, and then I heard the sound I didn't expect. A whisper. "Elijah!" I turned. The back wall of the cart was opening. Slow, careful. A shape emerged through the gap. A shadow with a heartbeat, Colette. She looked different, like she'd aged a year since the morning. Her cheeks were hollow, her lips tight, but her eyes burned. She knelt inside the cart beside me. Her hands moved fast, cutting the rope. "You came," I whispered. She shook her head. "No, I never left." Once my hands were free, she pressed something into my palm. Papers, new ones, new name, new date, this time mine. She had rewritten the future again. "There's a medic convoy leaving before dawn, heading south. You'll go with them, quiet, in the back. You're wounded. Nobody questions wounded men anymore." I stared at her. "What about you?" She looked away, just for a moment. "They won't search the hospital," she said. "Not yet. I'll delay the report, maybe even tell them you escaped when I was trying to treat you." "Colette!" Her name cracked in my mouth, but she reached up, touched my cheek, and silenced everything inside me. "You did something no one else dared," she said. "You didn't run. You stood still and let the fire come to you." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say it wasn't bravery. It was failure, desperation, guilt. But she knew, she always did. When she moved to the back of the cart, I caught her hand. "If I go and you stay, you'll live," she said firm, "and that will be enough." "But for how long?" She paused and then said softly, "Long enough to remember." She vanished into the dark as quickly as she had come. I stayed frozen, heart hammering against the ribs like fists on a door. An hour later, a second shadow opened the cart again. This time, it was a boy, 14, maybe 15, uniform too big, eyes wide. He nodded once, motioned for me to follow. Outside, the world smelled like iron and frost. The medic convoy was loading up. I limped quietly into the back of one of the trucks, surrounded by crates of bandages, morphine, and silence. The boy closed the canvas behind me, didn't speak, just slapped the side twice and vanished into the mist. And we drove, no questions, no names. Just wheels rolling through a war I no longer belonged to. I didn't know where we were going, not exactly, but I knew what I was leaving behind. Not just the battalion, not just Thomas, but the version of me that thought dying for an order was the same thing as living for a purpose. We stopped by morning, a small clearing near a river south of Reims. Too quiet for battle, too broken for peace. The others unloaded. I stayed inside, and then, through the slits in the canvas, I saw her, just for a second, standing on the bank of the river, arms wrapped around herself, hair pulled back, eyes closed. Colette. She wasn't supposed to be there. She had lied again, but this time, to keep her promise, she turned toward the truck, saw me and smiled. A small, tired, defiant smile, one that said, "We lived, even if just for this moment. Even if tomorrow came with death on its heels, we had chosen, and that choice could never be taken back. They never found me. Or if they did, they chose to forget. In war, sometimes a name disappears as easily as a bullet in mud. I became someone else, a man with no history and too much memory, and she became my silence. We stayed in the south for a time, in Provence. The hills there don't echo like the north. The wind doesn't carry the sound of guns, just the buzz of bees, the rustle of vines, the occasional bark of a dog who's never seen a trench. We stayed in a room above a bakery. The owner was a widow, half-blind, who never asked questions. She called me Emile. Colette called me Elijah only when the window was closed and the light was low. We didn't talk about the war, not directly, but sometimes in the quiet between sleep and dawn, I'd hear her whisper names of men I never met. Adrien, Paul, Mathieu. She carried their faces like rosary beads, counting grief in silence. I'd reach for her and she'd turn toward me, not to speak, just to be held some nights. I'd wake from dreams that weren't mine, dreams that belonged to the dead, and I'd find her awake too, watching the ceiling, her hands folded as if in prayer. We lived like that, not escaping, just breathing. And then, one day, it was over. The armistice, November 11th, 1918. The bells rang, not gunfire bells. Colette and I stood in the town square with a dozen strangers. Some cried, some didn't believe it. Others just stared at the sky like they were waiting for a trick. She didn't smile. She just slipped her hand into mine. "I don't know what to do with peace," I said quietly. She looked at me, her voice barely audible. "We start by planting something." And so we did. A single olive tree. Behind the bakery. She said it would take years to bear fruit. "Good," I told her. "That means we'll be here to see it." Weeks turned into months. The world didn't heal. It limped. The borders didn't bleed anymore, but people still did. Some wore their scars on the outside. Others buried them in silence. I wrote to my mother. Finally, no return address, just a letter. "Ma, I lived, but not the way you think. The man who left Missouri died somewhere between Reims and a woman's hands. The one writing to you now is still learning how to be whole. I don't know if it reached her. I never heard back." Years passed. I took work as a courier, nothing official, just small deliveries between farms and towns. I liked the walking, the quiet, the freedom of it. My body ached, but in ways that felt deserved. I'd find myself touching the scar on my ribs, not out of pain, but as proof that I had once made a choice and survived it. Colette worked with orphans, children who didn't know their own last names. She taught them how to thread a needle, how to boil water, how to speak with their eyes when words were too heavy. She never told them what she'd seen, but they trusted her anyway. Children know when someone carries truth. One evening, long after the war had settled into stories, we walked back from the river. She stopped beneath the olive tree. It had grown. Not tall yet, but strong. She touched its leaves, then turned to me. "You ever think of going back?" she asked. I thought about that often, but I never said yes. "There's nothing left to go back to," I said. She smiled. "There's always something, even if it's just ghosts." We stood there, two people made of ash and breath, and I said the thing I'd been holding since Reims. "I burned the orders, but it was you who saved me." She didn't respond, just stepped forward, rested her forehead against mine, like she had in that supply cart, like a vow spoken without words. I never forgot that feeling, even now, because time, like war, is a thief, and it came for her one winter. A fever, sudden, quiet, relentless. The doctors called it the same name they always did, influenza, but to me, it was a ghost in a nurse's uniform. I held her hand as she slipped away. She didn't speak in the end, just looked at me and blinked once, slow and certain, like she was giving me permission to carry her name with me. And I have, in every letter I never sent, in every path I walked after, in every silence I chose instead of violence. Now I am old. The lines on my hands run deeper than the trenches ever did. My back is bent. My legs ache when it rains, but I still walk. Every morning I visit that olive tree. It's taller than me now, full of life. Fruit hangs from its branches, like promises kept sometimes. A boy from the village walks with me. He asks why I always come here. I tell him it's where I left a piece of my heart. He thinks it's poetry, but it's not. It's truth, and on quiet days, when the wind is just right, I swear I hear her, her voice soft as dusk drifting through the leaves. "You chose." And I whisper back, "Yes, I did. Not the right choice, not the easy one, but mine." Some ghosts don't haunt places, they haunt hearts, and I carry mine with grace, because love, real love, doesn't end with war. It begins there. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a name, a silence that never quite left, we invite you to carry it forward. Leave a comment below. Tell us who you remember, a father, a brother, a friend, yourself, because stories like this only live if we keep telling them. If you felt the weight of these moments, if they reminded you of the cost of duty or the ache of love left behind, click like, not for the algorithm, but for the lives behind the uniforms. And if you believe these echoes deserve to be heard, shared, honored, preserved, then subscribe not just to a channel, but to a promise that we will keep telling the stories others forgot to. Thank you for watching and remembering.